Hi, I'm John Cerruto, and I'm with Gene Gerwin and Yvette Vieira of Atlantic Health, and they are spearheading a very important committee right now involving the community. Yvette, tell us about the conversation.
What we're doing with the community is trying to get them to engage in the conversation about what their preferences are for end-of-life care. Knowing full well this is a very difficult topic for pretty much everybody out there. But we're trying to normalize it, make that more comfortable, give them tools to be able to discuss it, because we think it's a really important topic that just has not been given the weight that it deserves.
Gene, you know, we hear the terminology advance directive often, but a lot of people are confused by it. What exactly is an advance directive?
An advance directive, first of all, there's a law in New Jersey in 1992 that validated advance directives as a legal document. And it's a document that expresses your wishes for future medical treatment under certain circumstances. And it's a very simple document. It just has to be signed, dated, and witnessed by two adults. And it's meant to capture the conversations that you have with your family or yourself about what you would want in certain circumstances. And it's good for people age 18 and above. So it's not limited to people who are nearing the end of life. It's for everybody to think about, because things happen to people at all ages.
So why is this conversation so important right now, and why are you bringing this message out to the public?
Well, I think what we're seeing nowadays in the medical community is a lot of advances in technology and a lot of treatments that really allow people to live much longer than they have in the past. Of course, with a lot of these treatments, there is usually a trade-off, or there can be a trade-off. So we want to make sure that when a patient comes into the hospital, that we're really honoring their preferences and their values and the way that they choose to both live and live the end of their life. So it's not about excessive treatment, it's about what are their preferences, what are their values, what's really important to them and to their family, and how they want to live, and then being able to honor that in the preferences and the treatment that they get while they're in hospital.
Okay, but there are benefits obviously about this conversation, and there are disadvantages of not having this conversation. You may want to share that.
Sure. I've spent the last 25 years doing consultations with families at the bedside about decisions near the end of life. And it's extraordinarily stressful. It's very difficult. And for families who have never had that conversation, and the patient is no longer able to participate in the conversation, it creates a huge emotional burden on the family, causes conflict in the family. If they've never had that conversation with their dad, for instance, and now they're faced with a physician saying, do you want to do this or you don't want to do this? I sometimes call it emotional paralysis, because they don't want to make a decision that's wrong. They love their dad. And it just makes, even if you have that advance directive that he made 10 years ago and you never saw it, it's locked away, it's still difficult.
All right, now it is difficult, of course, on all ends, but you know, the conversation's tough to have. And Yvette, how do you go about having this conversation?
Well, you know, the important thing is that there has to be an acknowledgement that this is important. And I think everybody understands that this is important. And then there are tools out there that can help people sort of engage in the conversation or prepare for the conversation. And that's what's really important, because if we were just to tell people, you know, go out and talk to your wife or your husband or your children about what you want at end of life, it's, as Jean said, is very paralyzing. It's a huge leap to take, and there's a lot of barriers that sort of get in the way. You know, just considering one's own mortality is terrifying. So what we're trying to do is to normalize it, to use these tools to really explore the values that you have as a person. So what is really important to you? Is it that you're able to get up every morning and get on your bike and take that 5-mile ride on the bike? Is it that you're eating food that you really enjoy and that you can appreciate it? What are those things that really matter to you in life? And then from there, transcending those into what your preferences would be at end of life. So it's a gradual process, and in no way do we think that it's easy, but we do think that it should be normalized and more comfortable.
Jean, give us an example. Again, you've done this for many, many years. Give us an example of somebody who would sit and say, you know, when I can no longer do this, whatever this may be.
Yeah. Let me just back up 1 second and tell you what's usually in those advance directives. It's very standardized language that says things like, if I cannot recover to an acceptable quality of life, and in the particular case I'm thinking about, that is what this gentleman's advance directive said. If I cannot recover to an acceptable quality of life. Well, what is acceptable to him was unknown because he had had a very large stroke, and he could possibly recover, but he would be very debilitated. And the neuro doctors were saying to his family, he won't be able to eat on his own, he'll have to have a feeding tube, he probably will not be able to be mobile, he may have some ability to communicate, but he will be cognitively impaired. And this family said, he doesn't want that. And it was kind of a shock to me because they were so adamant. Usually families are, unsure about what to do in such a situation. And of course they wanted him to live, which he could. He was on life support. But his family got together and spoke with me over several days. And his son said to me something very profound. He said, I've had enough chairlift conversations with my dad to know that if he were in that situation, he would not want to live like that. And it was based on the fact that he had gone through a Great Depression, and he came out of it by joining a bicycle club. And he and a bunch of other 70-something-year-old guys would bike 3 times a week. And he had told his family repeatedly, if I cannot bike, I don't want to live without that capacity. So it was a tough fight with the doctors because they're like, but he could live, but he didn't want to live the way he was predicted he was going to live. So everybody has a line in the sand, and some people would say, I'd be fine so long as I could do this or that, or I could sit in a wheelchair and I could still watch TV or communicate. Other people have a different line in the sand, which is why the document is good, but it doesn't tell us everything. And those nuances only come from those deep conversations that, as Yvette said, take time. It's over a period of time knowing how many times that person told you, this is my line in the sand, this is what's important, this is what makes my life acceptable to me.
All right. A lot of people in the public feel that they have to do an advance directive through estate planning, but that isn't necessarily the only way. Can you share, Yvette or Jean?
Well, an advance directive, especially in the state of New Jersey, can be you writing on a piece of paper your expressed wishes, what you would like, what you wouldn't like, and it needs to be witnessed by 2 people. The people that witness it and dated. And the people who are witnessing it have to be over the age of 18 and not your healthcare proxy. Right. So it's as simple as that. You don't have to go to a lawyer to do it. A lot of it is done through estate planning, which is fine. But what we're saying is that the conversation is important. So if you are sitting at home writing up your advance directive and you do have people witnessing it, we're hoping that maybe that is encouraging you to speak to those people around you, the loved ones that are involved in your life, about what is there. We don't want it to be an advance directive that goes into your safe that's never seen again and nobody knows where it is, and then something happens and where's the advance directive and what does it say?
Unfortunately, I think we've over-legalized it, which we've done with everything. And if it is done in the context of other legal documents, it often gets packaged up with those other legal documents. And it also is subject to the language that they put in it. And I've had people in the hospital say to me when I say, well, what does your advance directive say? They say, I don't know. I don't know. Yeah. So I'm like, you better go read what it says and have a conversation. And you can also, as Yvette said, you can just write on a piece of paper that I appoint my husband as my healthcare proxy and my son as my alternate, sign it, date it, and have it witnessed, and then have an extensive conversation with those 2 people or even more people in your family. And that's to me, the conversation is the better safeguard that your wishes will ultimately be followed.
So I can have a conversation with in-house, meaning my family, but can I have a conversation with my doctor, my medical provider? Are there forms that somebody can fill out through that process?
There is, and there's a number of forms out there that you can find. One of them that may be familiar to some people is a form called 5 Wishes, which was developed, can be used across the U.S., and 5 Wishes is an advanced directive, but it again also leads you a little bit through the process of what are your preferences, what are your values, so that it really informs your family or your healthcare provider a little bit more clarity on what your choices would be at the end of life.
Okay, so let's talk about the committee which you two spearhead. It's part of a community involvement. You have people from many different aspects in the community. What sectors?
Well, we have Imagine, which is a grieving center and counseling center for children who are experiencing loss. We have Camp Place School, education, elder care facility,
Community leaders?
community leaders. We have a number of people from the faith community. We have Drew University. We have some graduate students that are doing some research for us on this topic.
Spanish translator who works in the hospital,
Yeah.
religious clergy who are part of it, and Atlantic Health as the
Underwriter and
The body that's just brought them all together, really.
and really giving them the expertise on the clinical side of things. But we really need the community to embrace this and be the face of it.
So some clergy might be involved.
Absolutely. Congregations in churches, we've already been approached by several churches without even approaching them, because the time is right that people are talking about this and are worrying about how they're going to open up this conversation. And people feel safe in their congregations.
Yeah.
They often go to their clergy for advice.
And I think you and I were talking before, Jean, you had mentioned that maybe the best time to do this is when everybody's healthy and strong.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. I mean, this conversation is one, as we've spoken, it's not just one and done. It's a transition throughout your life, and that line in the sand can change as different things happen in your life.
Yeah.
But definitely, this is not just for people who have chronic serious illness, who are approaching the end of their life. This could be for anyone at any point. If there's an unexpected accident or if there's an unexpected illness that comes up, it really is appropriate to anyone 18 and over.
Yvette, let's talk about the target market, because again, you're not sitting here trying to change the perception of the whole state of New Jersey. We have a target market. I believe it's through Overlook Medical Center.
Right. So
And
what we're doing is we're looking at the market that Overlook Medical Center serves. So for the most part, it's the Union County. And we've done quite a lot of demographic work looking at all the different ethnicities and faith communities that are in here. Obviously, there's variable demographics, men, women. We're looking at seniors. Just trying to identify who we think, we know that everyone will benefit from it, but who we think is going to be able to really move forward with these conversations and really embrace them. We do believe it's appropriate for everyone 18 and over, but there are certain markets that we feel maybe have not engaged in this community endeavor or not engaged in these conversations before. So it's not just the Summit area. We're looking at Union as a whole, and we think it's an important conversation for everyone to have, regardless of age, health status, immigration status, ethnicity, religion, whatnot. It's important.
so let's talk about something that you created that is very appealing and very cute called TATE. Tell us about TATE.
You
Okay.
invented them at 2 o'clock in the morning, so
Yes,
you get to
it really was 2 o'clock in the morning. So we had one of our meetings at Imagine, which is the counseling center for children who are experiencing loss. And we did a tour of their facility, and it was a fantastic facility, really inspirational. And the staff from there pointed out to us that in each of the rooms was an elephant that was hidden in a painting or behind a mural, or a stuffed elephant that was in each of the rooms. And it really occurred to me that end-of-life planning or advanced care planning is the biggest elephant in the room, because everybody knows that it's an issue, but nobody wants to talk about it. And so we came away from that meeting quite inspired about this elephant in the room. And used that as a metaphor. So then we had to come up with a name, knowing that, end-of-life planning is the elephant in the room.
Right. You don't want to call it end-of-life planning.
Absolutely not. No.
That would send people running. So at 2 o'clock in the morning, for some reason, I woke up out of bed and I thought, oh my gosh, we should call it TATE. TATE, Talk About the Elephant, which we think is important. And that's what we want people to do, talk about the elephant in the room, which is end-of-life planning, your preferences and your wishes.
Okay, so now you're going to take this acronym, TATE, and this symbol, the elephant, and how are we going to reach the public now? What are some of the concepts and plans that you intend to do?
We are a work in progress, but we've been brainstorming just about every day about, first of all, I've been talking about advanced directives for 25 years, and the needle has not moved about people having conversations. So we're trying to totally reframe it in a user-friendly format that will encourage people. So we're talking about community theater, film festivals, murals that people can write on their, what I want to do before I die, kind of, just to get people talking. There's card games out there. There's just a lot of tools that have nothing to do with sitting down and writing out your last wishes. We don't want it to be about that. We want it to be, people can use humor, people can use multiple conversations with people that they don't even know, which opens up the conversation sometimes. And I'm trying to think if we have other, books, there's just a million different models of how you can do it in the community, embedded. So it's people, and we want to raise curiosity. Like when they see the elephant, well, what's that about? To get people to be curious and come.
Are there resources that people can go to maybe get support and how to start this conversation?
Yeah, we were actually, it was always part of our plan, and then we just spoke about it the other day as well, just to firm it up. The primary resource that we will be using to help people engage in the conversation is something called the Conversation Starter Kit. It is being produced by a group called the Conversation Project, which is a phenomenal group of people who have really put a lot of thought and effort into having these conversations happen and to changing the culture around end-of-life preferences and planning. So that's the number one tool that we're using. We're also going to collect resources which are subject matter experts or people that you can call or you can talk to who can help talk you through either how to have the conversation or what does it mean to say that you're on a ventilator or what are your preferences and whatnot. And we're going to be training hopefully a group of about 100 community leaders that are embedded in the community. So they might be faith leaders, they might be counselors, they might be members of the education community who are able to really identify with people and be able to answer questions and give them the support that they need to just start these conversations happening.
Now, I think it's important to put the message out there that this isn't the first time that there's been an activity like this towards a target market. Now, wasn't there a situation outside of New Jersey where a whole community got involved and had this conversation?
In Gunderson, Wisconsin, and other places who have done community efforts but they've also looked at it as a community engagement, where they've in Gunderson, I don't know what, a very high percentage of people to do advanced directives. But I think ours is just a little different in that we're really targeting the conversation, and the advanced directive document can come later, but the most important thing to start that, to have it be effective. I mean, there's a lot in the literature about, are advanced directives really effective? Do they really change what happens? Do people honor them? Do people know about them? Are they lost in a drawer somewhere? But the conversation, we've kind of lost touch with the art of verbal communication. And I just had a patient the other day who had no family whatsoever, no advanced directive, but it turned out on digging a little bit, his physician of 15 years said, I've known him for 15 years. I know he wouldn't want a feeding tube. He's 92 years old. He has advanced dementia. So that's clear and convincing evidence of that conversation. And we forget that conversations are powerful, much more powerful in some respects as a piece of paper.
Okay, now, again, we're going to go back to this. This conversation isn't easy. It is maybe more challenging for certain ethnicities, certain cultures, certain religious backgrounds. And
Yes.
Union County is highly diverse, which is
It's
your
very-
target.
Yeah, absolutely. They're very diverse, and we really need to be respectful of the different cultures and different norms that are in the different ethnicities in the community. There's been a lot of research done with African American and Latino community that they haven't really completed advanced directives maybe as much as the white community. That's not to say that they're not having the conversations. I mean, when you look at the research, across the board, everyone believes that this is important, but there are definitely different cultural barriers. And, we're not going to rush in and say everybody should do this and this is exactly how you should do it. What we're saying is we believe it's important to everyone, but let's find your way of doing this
Yeah.
so that it's palatable to you, so that it's important to you, so that it's meaningful to you and your loved ones and within your community. And if that means that you're talking to your pastor and your parents and your siblings and if it's a large group that it needs to come together to have this conversation, and that's a support system that you're used to, and that's part of your cultural identity, then that's important, and we want to respect that. And if it is that you just feel like you want to have this conversation with your husband or with your adult children, that's fine too.
Yeah.
We're not saying there's one way to have it or that there's only one type of conversation. We're just saying, let's do it.
And I think some communities have a fear of engaging in this conversation because it's going to cement them into some kind of a commitment that they're going to forego certain medical treatments. So there's a lot of unjustified fears that when we have our community facilitators trained, they'll be trained in all of those realities and facts that say, no, you don't have to be afraid of this. Because I do think there's a lot of fears and myths and things that we don't even know about yet. But we're going to do focus groups and try to dig a little deeper to find out what the barriers are to having the conversation.
Yeah, and that's why it's really important that this is a community project, because we want to find people in the community that are passionate about it, that are really invested in it and feel that it's important, because I feel that's the best way that we're going to understand how we can help them.
Yeah.
Now, will your committee have a timeline? Will it have we have a start now? Will we have a finish? Is there a period in time where we're saying?
Well, I think we're looking at a 3-year funding period. I would hope and suspect that it's going to grow in ownership by community partners. I think other hospital systems, other hospitals in Atlantic have already expressed a desire to know what we're doing and waiting until we launch, and then they would like to. So we're hoping that it spreads. You said we're not going to attack all of New Jersey, but we might.
Well, I know you're very ambitious, Gene and Yvette, and I'm sure you will do a terrific
I
job
think
on this
TATE is
topic.
just so cute. He's going to enamor a lot of people.
Well, in conclusion, you've seen a lot of innovation in medical care and equipment that has worked certainly as a positive for many of us in society, but now it also can be a drawback. And this is basically what we're saying. Do we want someone staying alive on one of these pieces of equipment long term where the quality of life just doesn't exist?
And they never wanted it, maybe.
And maybe they never wanted
Right.
it.
Right.
Well, we will get together and we will see the progress as we move forward.
Great.
And I would like to thank you both for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
And thank you for joining this segment.